It is a special day, a rescheduled day from last week, but it's devoted to a Soldier Resource panel. And I am so excited about this. It is military women raising boys into men. This is something that is huge on my heart, having a son, actually having two sons, actually having four sons. I got to think, how many sons do I have? That kind of day. Yes, it is. But in this world, and then as a military mom, what does that look like? As a single mom, what does that look like? So with me today is Goose and Heather Clark. How are you, ladies?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having us.
I am very excited for this. So tell the world, before we get right in and start going with our questions, I'd like you to take just a couple of minutes to tell the world who you are. We'll start with Goose.
So I'm Goose, first name Ashley Cameron. I'm retired United States Navy. I was a corpsman. I was medically retired after 10 years. I was in weapons department the first 2 years, and then switched over to corpsman, which is medic for Marine Corps Navy. After I got out, I found myself in, well, we won't get into it too long, but I became a yoga teacher. And my goal was to teach yoga to other veterans because I found it in my rehab when I was going through my rehabilitation before I retired. And now I teach yoga not only to veterans, but their families. I also teach adaptive yoga, people with spinal cord injuries, wheelchairs, traumatic brain injuries, Parkinson's, all the way to loss of limb, anything, you name it, blind. And then I also teach just that regular yoga when you want to go into a flat studio and sweat it all out. I teach that too as well. So yeah, so now I teach yoga. I also do fitness training. Fitness is a really big part of my life, and just being active, that active lifestyle, and continuing to serve others. So I have two kids. I have a boy, he's 9, and 9.5, excuse me, because if he sees this, he's going to be like, Mom, yo, I'm 9.5. My daughter's 11, and they're my world.
They're babies.
They are, yeah. Well, to me, they're not. To me, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys don't need me anymore, hardly at all. And then they need something, and I'm like, okay, you still need me. Good. So, but yeah, they're still young. I absorb all of it. I always catch myself. I've never said, I can't wait till you guys are driving, or I can't wait until like. My dad taught me that early on. Don't ever say that, because you absolutely can wait. Because when it comes, you're going to be like, what happened?
I know. And you know what? They will always need you. I remember my son being deployed, and he called. And I was like, why are you calling me? You never call. And he's like, you think I should take up the saxophone? I'm like, this I took it. I was like, you need me. You need me. You're deployed overseas as a Marine, but you need me to tell you if you should take up the saxophone. I'm on it. I can handle this. So, the little things. Heather, how about you? Tell us a little bit about you.
I kind of have a similar story to Goose. We kind of joke around that we're twins. I came to the military first as a spouse. I was an ombudsman for a couple of commands, and then I joined the Navy myself as an intelligence specialist. And I served with Navy intelligence and special forces and did a tour in Afghanistan. And I too became a yoga teacher because of my experiences in the military and because it helped with my rehab. It's something I wanted to extend out to offer other veterans. And because of COVID, my state has pretty much shut down yoga completely and indefinitely. So there's really no way to teach but Zoom, which I'm not really a fan of because I kind of like the in-person contact with students. Yeah. So I've kind of had to pivot and remodel my entire business plan. So now I've just found different mediums and platforms to be a mental health advocate for veterans. And I've done that through collaborations with other veterans, just doing stuff with media, interviews. Now I'm doing a couple of musical collaborations with other veterans that are in the music industry. And so I'm just trying to find new ways to continue my mission while I'm waiting on the world to start back up. And I'm a mom of 3 kids, one son, he's 23. and 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters.
Oh, I can't wait for grandkids because then I can spoil them and send them home.
Yes, exactly.
So,
It's
first, they
really
need
cool.
to be dating somebody. We need that first, but we'll get there. We will get there. But I want to put this out there to everyone that is watching. This is specifically about raising sons. So please don't waste time putting comments in there about daughters. That's not what this is about. Hashtag. Don't do it. You're wasting my time and our time. So I had to give that my little 2 cents in there about it. Okay. So we're going to get started. Here we go. I gave my spiel. So I believe raising kids nowadays has completely changed. From when I raised my son at 26, even to my son that's 19, I can't even imagine Goose having younger boys now. And nowadays, I see a big difference in society, how society views boys, and how society views men. There's kind of what I found is there's this undertone of almost having to apologize if they're too masculine. This is my opinion. What are you guys seeing? What do you feel about that?
You can go first, Tyler, if you want. Go ahead.
I agree. I didn't grow up with a father, so it was mostly women in my life. I did have my grandfather in my life, and it wasn't until I got in the military that I really had that exposure to males and, just like their natural way of being. And I think it's really important that all of these groups that are saying, please don't suppress me. Please let me be who I am. This is who I was born to be. This is who I am. We also need to extend that same courtesy to males. Guys need to be guys. I think that's important to their identity. It's natural for them. They can still be respectful and mannerly and still be guys. There's a time and place that they change hats when they're hanging out with their friends. And I think that that's important, that they have guy time and we have women time. And I think that society has just really put this blanket judgment on men. And really, everything that's happening needed to happen, but we need to understand that these are individual actions. We need to hold individuals accountable for their behavior, not all men, because not all men are disrespectful. If your son is disrespectful and an asshole, that's on you. That respect starts at home. And if you don't teach them right and they go out and do that, that's because they didn't properly learn that at home. So don't just try to judge everybody by the same standard, because that's not fair.
Yeah.
And so I just really have tried to instill respect in my son. And at times he's been very disrespectful, but now that he has reached a stage that he's more mature, he even apologizes when he accidentally swears on the phone to me. So that to me was progress, I was like, okay, I did teach you right.
How do you feel, Goose, about it?
It's kind of funny to me because in society, that whole you have to apologize for being too manly. However, it's like that lost, it's like that legend, like a man's man these days. That's a legend, right? That man that can fix everything, that's good with his hands, that knows how to do a little bit of everything and knows a little bit about every, you know what I mean? About everything. Yeah. It's just, that's such a lost thing. That's it's like the old cowboy way or, whatever. And it really is kind of a lost trait because of how there's so many more families that are divorced, so many more that are being raised by single parents, whether it's dad, mom, both in split homes. And then you have split rules, and rules are different in mom's house, rules are different in dad's house. So I think a lot of it has to do with just how our society has changed so much. My parents were married 42 years. I've been married twice. Where did I F up? It's different. Our ideals are different. We are living in a very privileged society as well. And that's where that disrespect comes in. My son and I are learning a lot right now about respect and teaching your son that respect and instilling that respect for others, no matter what, is super important, because by the time he knows that he needs to respect others in his interactions, that he obeys rules, And no matter if he doesn't understand, that's the thing, is like, from the get-go, I'm like, hey, this is the rule. This is what I give you, this direction I give you. Do not question it right now. You're going to go and you're going to do it. And then later, if you want to come back and say, because he is very smart, so sometimes he'll come back and go, well, I thought it would be better if I did it this way. And I'll just like, well, he's effing right, isn't he? Yeah, he's right. Like, but I can't show it, so it's just that instilling that respect and teaching them how to be empathetic towards others as well. There's nothing wrong with empathy. That doesn't mean that you're soft or sensitive. It just means that you're empathetic. You can try and understand others' feelings. So by the time they're able to understand this empathy, it doesn't have to be whiny or anything, but just this empathy, and then treating others with respect and following and obeying rules no matter what. By the time that he becomes a man, he's going to be that respectful man that just does the right thing, that cares for others, that has empathy, that tries to understand. And he's not considered I don't know if we're allowed to use colorful language, but not.
You can if you want.
Not considered a dickhead, or, and it's just, there's a time and a place for it. And you definitely, but you have to start it early. Like, you can't just let him rule the roost until
right.
18 and then expect to put the rules down. I mean, you have to start it from the very beginning. And I absolutely have. Boys learn differently than girls. They learn differently. They need that roughness more than girls do. Some girls do. I did. I was a tomboy. Like, I needed to play rough. But that's the other thing, is that boys actually need that roughness. And that's where, if a single mom is raising the boy and she doesn't get rough, or then that's when, then let him go get rough with his friends. Like, let him play a little rough, because he does need that. Like, that helps keep that masculinity, and that, like, boys just like to be rough. That's just what they do. Yeah. And boys learn differently than girls. Like, sometimes it takes them, I don't even think they grow out of this, but you got to tell them like 3 times, or you have to like show him first, or you have to make sure that he's looking you in the eye, because otherwise he's, and girls just kind of just tell them like once, maybe only before they're teens, but you just tell them like once, and they're like, oh yeah, I got it, because they've got that nurturing, I just want to do this, I want to help mom take care of everything. So
right.
I think that the society definitely like, oh, well, he's just too masculine. You got to be more sensitive. Just because he doesn't cry, just because he doesn't, it doesn't mean he's not sensitive. I think more of just empathetic, I think, is really, we need to recognize that, just being more empathetic.
Do you think so? Like, as a single mom, I always said, I'll put a male figure, whether it's my brother, whether it's somebody in their life, because I believe we need a female role model and a male role model, even if it's not your biological family or relative of that. Do you think the military gave you a different view on raising men? Because you're in a man's world.
Somewhat. Somewhat. I mean, I knew how guys acted and how they needed to act. And, I, of all people, should hate men, really. My father was completely absent. I've been, sexually assaulted multiple times. I have every reason in the world to not like men, but I don't hold all of them accountable. And in the military, I met more honorable men than I did dishonorable. And I still have male friends that are there for me, that show me a lot of respect, that support me. And they were a good example, both in the military and in the veteran world, of what males can be and how amazing that they can be. And that's something that I try to instill in my son. And it wasn't easy, because he didn't have any role models that he could look up to. And so that was a challenge. And through his teenage years, being a Navy brat really affected him. Moving all the time, me doing a tour overseas affected him. And I struggled with him for 8 years through drug addiction, through overdoses and suicide attempts. But I never gave up on trying to instill that core in him of values and morals. And finally, when we reached the end of that, when he scared himself to death basically by overdosing, he came back to me, to the little boy that was sensitive and respectful and loves his mom, And I think the biggest validation was when he gave me a Mother's Day card that said, "Who knew mom knew everything?" You know, and so now we have an amazing relationship where he's very respectful. And when he calls, we'll talk for 2 or 3 hours at a time. And so I feel successful now when I didn't before, when I felt I was failing. But I feel successful now that I raised a good man.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it that the consistency, right? Even when, shit's hitting the fan for years and years and years, you're like, you don't give in to the excuse of the bad behavior. You're like, these are the standards. You created a standard, and eventually they're going to conform, or they're not, because we have free will. But you're never going to give them the excuse that it's okay to be less of a man. That's kind of what I heard.
And I had to have a kind of a man's talk with him right at the end before he kind of got better. He was very suicidal, and I had to drive to his apartment and say, "Do I need to take your guns away?" And I sat him down and had a beer with him, and I was like, "Look," I was like, "this runs through our family, and I know it's not easy. I struggle with it. Your sister struggles with it." I said, "But here's the thing about our family. We don't give up, ever. So you need to get through. You need to have your moment. You need to get over it and pick yourself up and be a man." And I could just see something click in his head. And he made a huge change after that.
Yeah. And still working through. Instilling it, sticking to it, and working through it. Now, Goose, you're on the beginning end of the story. So do you see as a child, do you see him even maybe fighting against you, like have the power and that? But I really do believe when you grow up in a man's world, whether you're the only daughter in a room full of brothers, if you grow up in or you work and spend a full time in mostly a man's kind of job or career, or it does give you a different perspective. Do you see that, Goose, with the little one? I mean, I don't remember when my guys were that young.
So like I said, I grew up as a tomboy. My dad were best friends, and he always, all of his friends would say, because there's 13 years between my sister and I, so it was me for a long time, just me. And all of his friends would be like, "Bill, you need a son." And he'd be like, "This is the best son a guy could ever have right here. Like this, no way." So, and I was a closet ballerina, so I still had my girly, like I had my balance, you know what I mean? But my dad just, I think in general, was just such a good man that he set that tone and that example to me so that I could search out a good man, hopefully, that would be good to me. And my search obviously hasn't gone that way. I've managed to believe that the two men I was married to would change for me. So my second marriage was very tumultuous at the very end. It was very violent. It ended very violently. I almost died. But before that, and that was because I went to leave him because he was not setting a good example for my son or my daughter. Setting a good example as to my daughter as this is how a man should treat a woman, and he wasn't setting a good example to my son either. He, the long list of infidelities, verbal, emotional, all of it, right? And then of course at the end, and he almost kills me in front of our children. And so there was no going back at that point. Like absolutely not this, and he's not in their life. I've done everything I can to just make sure that my kids have the best opportunities to have positive role models because he's not in their life actively. And that's on him. He's chosen that path. Like he comes up with excuses. He allows the excuse of having to have a monitor as being an excuse to not be a good parent. And that's not an excuse. My dad was a huge role model for my son. And I'm so grateful for that. And like I was telling you, like I lost my dad last year, and even to this day, because of that role model that my dad gave my son. And my dad only had 2 girls. He didn't have a son, but he was raised with 6 kids. And so, he was around a bunch. And to this day, my son will say something like, "Grandpa would have liked this," or "I would have, I enjoyed this with Grandpa." Like he has so many memories with my son. And so now that we don't have my dad as a role model actively right now, I'm lucky enough that I, like Heather, I've had more positive relationships built with men in the military. I've seen more honorable men in the military than I have not. And I have a wolf pack, and my wolf pack is, probably a good handful of guys who would do anything for my kids. I mean, they have their own families, but they wouldn't think twice about laying their life down for my kids too, And uncles, my kids have, Uncle Jesse, Uncle Jake, Uncle Louie, like they have all these uncles, right? And all of them are just there for them anytime that they need to. They need to talk or anything like that. And then Uncle Justin, that's another one that's been in our life. And so he has that positive role model in other people, luckily. It's not an everyday of occurrence. And so because it's not that everyday occurrence, like I was talking about with that difference between daughter and son, I've been told that it's amazing how I can go from, like, do you guys ever see Sally Field in any movie that she's in? She does that manic episode, right? And every movie that she's in, and she does this manic episode where she's like, she's bawling, and then all of a sudden she turns to this, and she's like, and so like that like shift. Apparently, I'm really good at it, going from like, if you don't get over here right now, I'm gonna be, and I'll just be like, I'm a yes, you but talk to me like that, son. And then 2 minutes later, I'm like, hey, come here, let's talk. Like, I love you, he loves you, and so I've had people like, wow, dude, like you're manic, like crazy, but you are a single mom because you do have to have that balance. You do. Yeah. And the kids are healthier for it, my daughter included, but my son especially, having that balance. He needs the nurturing. He needs you to be physical in like that roughhouse way, but he also needs to be physical, like showing affection, like still give me a hug and a kiss, and he's cuddly. He likes with me at night, but man, he likes to wrestle. And you like those needs, they tell you those needs. Like you just have to be willing to really pay attention to those and answer those, because they'll tell you what they need. They may not voice it, but their actions will. And so any kid, any child, boys especially, like their actions really do speak.
They do. You have to be present and listen.
Yeah. And so you can just pay attention to those signs and know, like, all right now, he needs discipline right now because he's got an attitude and nope, it's not okay, And then sometimes, he needs a little reinforcement and he needs his mom and he needs me to cuddle him and he got hurt and he needs an ice pack and it's a splinter, but okay, fine, we'll get you an ice pack. So I think just really listening to that to keep that balance, because if you can't have a positive role model, then you need to do it. Like
you got to stack it up and be the
positive male role model, period. And if you can't find anybody, then you have to fill it. Luckily, Heather, she's able to fill it. I am too, but I am also lucky enough to have some positive role models for my son.
Yeah, I love, because you can kind of visualize when you're listening, you can visualize the younger years and then the older years. With the application might be a little different, but the fundamentals and the morals between both of you are basically the same, and you can see how it translates into that boy into a man, whatever the ups and downs, whatever kind of life brings. So what would you give, because I knew this would go super fast and we'd only like touch on it like a hair of it, what would you suggest, and either as single moms, what would you suggest to help change society? Because I believe, you each have an action. That action creates a ripple effect. We're all energy. And when one person closes their eyes and turns their head and says, that's okay, that action ripples. When you stand up and you said, no, I'm going to do this, or you have a stance, that ripple effect happens. So what would you suggest out there to people listening, other moms? They don't have to be in the military at all. Obviously, we have single moms all over, including myself. I raised my son for a very long time by myself. How do you say it's okay? How do you raise them? What do you tell the other moms out there when they're questioning, or they're, is this normal? If they don't have experience of being around men.
I think first and foremost, if you can find positive role models to bring in, that would be the number one thing to do. I unfortunately didn't have that because I lived in a state where I didn't have family. But if you can't, I think the most important thing is just sticking to your guns and letting them know, especially teaching school at all different levels now, telling these boys it's okay to be yourself. Don't be a victim. It's okay to have a sensitive side, but don't play the victim. Understand that not everybody wins. That is something that I instilled in all of my kids. I didn't just let them win games when they were little. Like I tried to teach them reality so that they weren't hit, with it when they became an adult and then just crashed. And so, and also looking back, I think I would have different approaches and maybe even rules for my son than I did my daughters, because I was just trying to like get through the day and I had kind of like standard rules for everybody. But
Yeah.
now I think I would try to tailor it a little bit more for a son versus a daughter because they are different to raise.
I like that. Yeah, because it's like being proactive in your thinking. Because I remember, like, dear God, don't let me kill any of you before. That's all I wanted, to like everybody get in their bed, safe and sound, without me losing my shit. But if I had forefront of thinking of how I would react or rules that I would play out for when, stuff happens, God, life would have been so much easier for me. I was smart.
Yeah. I mean, having a plan and having that baseline, like my kids know, and my son especially, and I say my son especially just because he is pushing buttons. He's my button pusher. He wants to push the limits. He is struggling with the fact that he wants to be man of the house. And my dad always would tell him, like, you're the man of the house. What does the man of the house do? The man of the house takes care of his women, takes care of his girls, listens to his mom, does what needs to be done, and be a good person and be a good man. Just be a good man. And so kind of realizing head on, like, or early on, like, what does that mean to be a good man? Well, it means that, you know what, you know how to manage your emotions. Like, that's a huge one, is helping your child, helping your son early on, help him like manage his emotions, teach him how, and boys get some of their emotions out and in that physical roughness and playing. And when you allow them to have that space, it helps them not have those outbursts, because the hormones are different from boys to women. They are different. And so they need that. And so that helps them manage their emotions, to have an outlet, let them know, like, it's okay. My son will get super frustrated sometimes, and he will get so frustrated, I can see him like clenching his jaw, but at the same time, his eyes are welling up with tears because he's just like, he's so mad because he's trying to say something to me and is going to be talking back to me and disrespecting me. And I won't no, I will not tolerate it. No, son, you are listening to me. You are the child. I am the adult. This is my house. These are the rules. This is what you're going to do. And he'll get super upset. And then I'll say what I need to. And then again, this plays out later in grown men, that they don't, we're women. We want to fix it right now. We want to squash it. Let's just get this over. Let's talk it through. Guess what? Men don't work that way. Like, men sometimes just be like, I need a fucking minute before I blow up. Like, be alone. And if you don't leave them alone, you're poking a grizzly bear. And so because I know that later on, I practice that with my son. And once I say what I need to say and I can tell he's upset, I'm not going to poke the baby grizzly. I say, do you need a couple of minutes to go collect yourself? And he'll just go. And I go, okay, go. And he'll go to his room. He'll have some space. I'll ask him if he's ready. If he says yes, he can come out. If he's not ready, okay, we're going to wait. And then if it seems like it's taking too long, I'll walk in there and say, hey, are you ready? Can we talk? And he does have times where he'll come to me and say, Mom, can we talk in private? Absolutely, dude. Like, always have time for that, and always make sure that you're giving them that, like, attention head on. Because I think a lot of parents aren't active with their kids and look them in the eye. If you're going to tell them something serious, whether it's love them, like whatever it is, you need to look at those kids in the face, sit down with them, hold their hand, like, and don't just give them reinforcement when they're doing something good. Give them positive reinforcement for no reason other than that's just, hey, it's quiet in the car right now. I just want you to know that I love you very much, and I am very proud of the young man that you are right now. I'm super proud of you. Like that positive reinforcement, not just good, I think is super important as well, because then they just, get to where like, well, only if I do good things are they proud, just, I think positive reinforcement is huge as well, like at all times, and finding that balance. And from the get-go, you need to like lay down those rules, that expectation, and then as long as you just keep that expectation, then when they start pushing, all you got to do is give them a look like, now is that what is that what I expect of you? No, it's not. Okay, what do I expect of you? Then that's what needs to happen. Like you have to do it early on. You can't like, we're going to wait till he's 5 or 6. No, you need to do it now, because the testosterone and the emotions, like all that, like, and again, just that, like, I can hug you, I can kiss you, but I can play rough with you at the same time. Let's talk about how to manage your emotions. Maybe you should go outside and just run around the block if you're really mad at me, so that you don't have those outbursts. And treating them or teaching them how to treat women well, but also how to just respect others and have empathy. And that doesn't mean you're a sissy. It just means it's all part of the package of being a good man.
Yeah. It's the consistency, like you were speaking of, and eventually that consistency becomes solidified.
Yeah.
And just who they are, and you give them tools. The consistency gives them tools to then apply. So then my son knows, because of the same thing, he's got to exercise. If he doesn't, he's going to blow his gasket, and so it's creating those.
It's even double, and it's double for my son, because that's me. Like if I don't exercise or do something physical, like I'll blow a fuse. So it's like he's got it because he's a male, but he's also got it because mom's the same double-edged sword for him, poor guy. But also that, and I just want to touch on, and I know we got to go, but that fixer guy that we talk about, the legend that can fix anything, that can, maybe I can fix anything. You don't have to wait until they know how to use a tool. Like start from the very beginning. If they have a problem, if there's an issue, help them talk through like a resolution so that they can get their brains working on how to fix something. And later on, guys are just that way. They want to fix things. Like they want to, you know what I mean? They want to fix it. And so a really good man wants to be able to fix something. Somebody's got a problem. My child has a problem. My wife has a problem. Like whatever. I want to fix it. And so that can start early on. Like it doesn't have to be handyman. It could just be like, I want to mend your broken heart. That's where that empathy comes in. Like, let's find a resolution to your problem instead of you just having a problem and getting frustrated about it. Let's talk it out. Like, let's find a solution, a resolution. And the military totally teaches you that, because the military teaches you, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a resolution.
I think also we have to, as mothers, let them fix things. We have to show them that maybe their way is not the right way, but we have to give them also that opportunity, because then that translates into women.
Yep.
I think it's important to let them fail sometimes too.
Yes.
Because then they learn a valuable lesson, like, oh, like maybe what you were saying was correct. And then that has been my experience several times where I'm just like have to step back and I'm like, okay, you know better. And then every single time they come back and they're like, you know what, you were right. I don't know what I was thinking. And so that's part of the lesson that I've learned, is to let them fail. And just like the military trained us. So when the time and opportunity came for us to act on that training, we had the skill sets to do that. And that's kind of the same thing with consistency with kids and teaching them morals and values. And even though you think that it's falling on deaf ears, they hear you. They hear you. And eventually, if they don't show it right away, they eventually will show it as adults. And that's what I love about having adult children, is because now I can be friends with them. And that's a really awesome experience.
Yes, I always told my kids, I'm not your friend, I'm your mother. But now
now we can be friends.
Now we
Yeah.
can be friends because you know what? I don't have to discipline you. That's what the police officers and the laws are for. Um, to take on that job. But is there any last little snippet before we close up here that you want to share or that was really useful for you?
Don't give up. I mean, as many times as I wanted to give up and was exhausted from parenting on my own, I was like, just don't ever give up on your kids because you know who they are. You know what they're capable of. And in the end, they're going to develop into the person that you raised them to be, into the person that you know that they are. And I told my son I was doing this panel and I had reservations about doing that because I didn't know how he would feel about it. And he was all for it. And I said, at the end of it, I said, you know what, son? I just want to let you know I've raised a good man and I'm very proud of you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry, Heather.
Never give up. Definitely. Never give up. Definitely. Especially like when, I mean, there's times where I'm right here. It's going to happen. And I would say don't be afraid to admit, especially if you have children and they're, you know, my son especially, he's super smart. Like he just gets things, he sees the world in a different way. And so because of that, I have to support that, right? And I can have pretty adult conversations with my kids and explain. And there are times when, hey, if mom messed up, I need to own up to that. Like, because that shows that, like, even mom messes up, it's okay to mess up. It's actually better to admit when you mess up and be honest about it, apologize, and then you can move on. Like, that's a big, huge lesson that we're working through right now. And, you know, just always being honest. Like, it's better to be honest, even if you think you're going to hurt somebody or you're going to get in trouble. It's better to be honest because if you're not going to, you know, just figuring out the core values that you want to teach your kids and then practicing them yourself and showing, you know, my son, the big thing for me is to just teach kids, like, it's okay to be afraid of things, but just don't let them stop you from living your life. You know, just like Heather said, like, don't give up, even if it just, oh, I'm done, I'm exhausted, because there are those times when you're just like, I'm done, I need a minute. Sometimes I'm like, no, mom, for 5 minutes. Like, no, mom. You can't say it. You just can't say mom for 5 minutes. And that's when they know, like, okay, mom needs 5 minutes, you know? And definitely
Mom needs a timeout.
And definitely have boundaries with your kids. You know, there's a time and a place for everything. Have those boundaries so that they know that boundaries are healthy and they can respect others and respect their boundaries later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you guys gave such value. I'm so thankful that you're here. I'm so thankful that you rescheduled with me and it all worked out. This is one of those that will go down and need to be replayed and resent because this is so important because everybody, you know, our men, this is our future. You need men and you need women or we will no longer exist here. And we need to let each one be exactly, we need that feminine beauty, we need that masculine beauty too. And if we don't foster that, man, there's going to be some chaos that happens in this world. So please do not give up on letting those men be men. We need good men in the world, and it comes from having good, strong women. So thank you. Thank you, ladies, for doing your part
Thank you.
in raising men.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. And to everybody else out there, until next time, which happens to be tomorrow, just so happens that it's tomorrow, another resource panel. Make sure you join our table and have a great night. We will see you. Take care.